Seeing through the eyes of a killer, monster, or supernatural force as they stalk, attack, and slay is a great way to scare an audience. But when we see these shots, what are we afraid of? And do we identify with the killer or their victim?
Shut the door.
How can filmmakers scare audiences using 3 different types of POV shot? And how is what we hear just as important as what we see? By putting us directly into the shoes of the characters, POV shots create tension, suspense, and fear. We're not just watching a scary thing happen to someone, we're actively experiencing it. We usually see from the perspective of the victim. As they see the killer looming up behind them, or enter a gruesome lair, their terror is our terror. But what about seeing from the perspective of the killer?
Michael!
One way to do this is to use what could be called the conventional killer's POV. We see through the eyes of a psychopath or monster, but still identify with, and are afraid for, the victim. This type of POV shot has several distinguishing elements. Firstly, we typically know the victim well, and they're often the protagonist. In Jaws, we're not meant to see the swimmers as a tasty snack. We're meant to be afraid they're about to be eaten. By the time we see Clarice Starling through Buffalo Bill's goggles, we know all about her childhood.
I took one lamb and I ran away as fast as I could.
And have followed her from naive rookie to on the verge of catching a serial killer. When we see Marion Crane through Norman Bates' eyes, we know she's stolen money to marry her boyfriend, but has decided to give it back.
I'd like to go back and try to pull myself out of it.
If we don't know the victim, we at least meet them first, before seeing them from the killer's POV. In the opening scene of Jaws, we see a young woman going for a late night swim.
Where are we going?
Swimming!
Before we see her through the eyes of the shark. These types of POV shots tend to be short, giving us no time to identify with the killer. In Jaws, they're only 8 to 10 seconds long. The night vision shots in Silence of the Lambs are mostly 10 to 15 seconds long. And when we hear sounds with these shots, it's the victim we hear, not the killer. In Buffalo Bill's lair, the only sound we hear is Clarice breathing. We don't hear him at all until he cocks his pistol. This connects us with the victim, even when we see them from another POV. We want to shout at them to run, creating tension and dread. This also feeds into our own fear that someone or something could be stalking us. But what about shots that ask us to identify not with the victim, but the killer? We still see the victim through the eyes of a predator, but typically it's the killer who's now familiar to us, while the victim is a stranger. The 2012 film Maniac features extensive shots from the POV of a disturbed young man stalking and killing in Los Angeles. We learn about his traumatic childhood and fetish for mannequins. We even see him fall in love. But we know nothing about his victims, only meeting them just before he kills them.
Hi.
The 2010 Hong Kong movie Dream Home goes even further by creating empathy for a young woman whose POV we follow as she goes on a killing spree. She dreams of moving her family into a waterfront apartment, like the one she wanted as a child. She works 2 jobs to try to get a mortgage, but her parents die before she saved enough money, and the sellers put the apartment out of her reach, even with her father's insurance. We feel sorry for her, so when she starts killing the apartment block's residents to make the sellers lower their price, we root for her, not her victims, who we know little about. If we don't know the killer well with this type of shot, we at least meet them before we see their victims. At the start of Peeping Tom, we see the eye of a filmmaker opening, before we see his first victim. In the opening scene of Halloween, we see through the eyes of Michael Myers, before we see his sister.
We are alone, aren't we?
These types of POV shot tend to be long. We typically move with the killer in a continuous tracking shot as they stalk and attack their prey. Halloween's opening shot is more than 4 minutes long. The POV shots in Maniac run to several minutes each.
No, it freaked me out.
And when we hear sounds with these shots, we hear the killer instead of, or as well as, the victim. In Halloween, we hear Michael breathing through his mask. In Maniac, we hear Frank talking to himself.
I see you too.
Hearing the sounds of the killer, knowing them well, or at least meeting them first, and seeing through their eyes for an extended period of time, connects us to them. We become a voyeur and an unwilling participant in the act, making us feel uncomfortable and unsettled. This also taps into our fear of our own natures and what we might be capable of. But what if the killer isn't human? A third type of shot could be called the sinister or supernatural POV. With this type of shot, there's no visible threat on screen, and what we're looking at is often innocuous, but we sense a malignant force surrounds and threatens the characters. In the Evil Dead films, we see through the eyes of the demons and spirits, terrorizing Ash and his friends. In Hereditary, we sense a sinister presence surrounds a grieving family. The use of sound and score is crucial with these shots. If we watch this scene from Suspiria without sound, 2 girls are just taking a late night swim. But if we add the score, it now feels as though a sinister presence is watching them. The director Dario Argento worked with the band Goblin to create this sinister POV using sound, telling them, "I need the audience to feel that the witches are still there, even if they're not actually on screen." Seeing through the eyes of a sinister or supernatural force creates a growing feeling of unease that something bad is about to happen. It also taps into our fears of the unknown and the unseen. Whichever type of POV shot filmmakers choose, they're one of the most cost-effective ways to build tension and suspense. Requiring little more than imaginative camera work and sound design. By mounting a camera to a piece of wood and running through the trees, and later attaching it to a motorbike, Sam Raimi created a horror classic for $375,000 with only 13 crew members and 5 cast. They also can be used for clever, creative storytelling. In the Uruguayan horror thriller The Silent House, we hear creepy sounds. And see frightening images from the perspective of a young girl being stalked by a killer. Only for the POV to be reversed, revealing she was the killer all along. Remade in America in 2011, the original film was shot for only $6,000 in one location with 3 actors. Thanks to its clever use of false perspective, the film stands up favourably alongside its more expensive remake, showing that whether you're shooting a Hollywood blockbuster or a micro-budget horror, one of the best ways you can engage and scare an audience is to create a killer POV. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. For more episodes and to sign up for a free Centerframe membership, visit centerframe.com.